Trump tweeted out that major consideration being given to naming Antifa a terrorist organization that he would be watching closely. And of course, the left was upset about this, saying that, well, how could you declare Antifa a terrorist organization when down there are white supremacist groups and they're the ones who commit actual violence? And we'll get into why that is entirely inaccurate as it relates to Portland and Antifa at large. But President, I think you got a lot of people who will sign a petition here. Point one, this is what the left uses, and I think this is why we need to designate them a terrorist organization. They say that Antifa, they aren't terrorists because they really aren't that violent.
They're known as Antifa, and they're also known for being violent.
Before we get into the metadata, I guess, I don't know if that really applies in this context, but
maybe.
We personally infiltrated Antifa, and they were handing out knives, brought sawed-off shotguns. We're talking about shooting people at a Ben Shapiro protest, and by the way, our footage led to some arrests.
You're gonna take the knife. How much?
Jeez.
I have like on the border between just a regular rifle and an assault weapon.
What does that mean?
Right. Style.
And I've got a handgun.
That's a guy, by the way.
I've got 2 AKs.
Could have fooled me.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what he's trying to do, is fool you, and then sue you for not using the right pronouns.
Fooling himself.
Right.
Don't forget, Antifa member tried to bomb an ICE facility, and he was shot when his rifle jammed. So, yet again, Antifa, not so adept at using hammers or cleaning their rifle.
Thank God.
Just get some Ballistol or Hops number 9, you asshole.
That's what you're mad about?
Then there's the Dayton shooter, by the way, an Antifa member or supporter, likely both, who praised the ICE firebomber as a martyr. Right, and this is important to note that the left tries to throw everything under the umbrella right now. They say, well, white supremacists, right? White supremacy, this isn't a response to white supremacy. And well, hold on, what's white supremacy? If you look at Antifa, the signs, the shirts, it says, if you vote for Trump, you're a racist.
Yeah.
So they're throwing everybody, including anyone who has a MAGA hat at their local church, as white supremacists, and that's what they're fighting when they say that they're anti-fascist. I want to make this really clear right now, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying all liberals, just like they say all white supremacists, all Trump voters are white supremacists. Yeah. I am talking about Antifa. You, Antifa, specifically, your violent crimes. Another argument the left makes that they shouldn't be a terrorist organization. They say, well, there's a lack of organization. Right? They say they can't be a terrorist organization because they don't have a leader, they don't have a clearly defined charter or roster. That's literally their strategy, is to try and remain anonymous.
Yes.
And keep in mind, they're still organized enough for us to infiltrate. That's important to note because we got on their encrypted messaging apps and they meet up and they try to, I guess, create this illusion that there is no central organization. Yeah. That's not the case. We've seen it firsthand. And when you're talking about a terrorist organization, you don't just need to say, do they have a roster? Do they have a roster of leaders? Do they have some kind of a manifesto? It's very clear wherever they go. There are congruent sort of acts of violence, one of which is a very clear anti-police officer ideology.
Yeah. All cops are bastards! ACAB! All cops are bastards! ACAB! All cops are bastards!
Oh, it's a new chant. That was a rough transition.
Not very organized.
Go shoot yourself!
Now don't be upset.
Wow.
That they won't hire smart people.
Yeah.
Suicide is the only way out.
All cops are bastards. Well, why do you think they're all bastards? Because they all generalize.
Wait a minute.
They all profile blacks. So you have a problem with generalization. All cops are bastards.
Also, race traitor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Race traitor. That's what they were saying that one black officer. I felt so bad for the guy.
I know.
Yeah,
He's just
sucks.
sitting there trying to do his job. And you know what, Antifa? You're turning people into conservatives by doing this. Something else that's important to note, their violence isn't directed, by the way, just at, they go, this is how it happens. Because they say, well, hold on a second. All Trump supporters are white supremacists. Right. They say, yeah, so that means all Proud Boys. That means people who are basically men's Christian groups who support Donald Trump. And then what happens is you go down the totem pole there, and after the Proud Boys left, Antifa just assaulted people who were passing by who they thought might be conservative. I mean, that should seem like
indiscriminate.
Those were not Proud Boys. They had long since left. Another point here when we're talking about terrorist organizations, the U.S. Federal regulations, they define domestic terrorism, as the unlawful use or threatened use of force or violence by a group of individual based and operating entirely within the United States or Puerto Rico without foreign. So it does talk about or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. Does Antifa fit this definition? Absolutely. Not only do they fit the definition, keep in mind, terrorism, you don't necessarily have to commit violence. You have to instill terror. Antifa obviously does that, and then they go one step further and actually commit acts of violence.
Yeah,
so they're a terrorist organization plus. These people are enemies of the United States. I think that's important to note. They're enemies of left, right, all American citizens who want to have a conversation.
Yes.
But I also think it would be important to classify them as a terrorist organization because then the mainstream media would have to cover it more accurately. Because right now, without this classification, and they just, as we showed you earlier, they said, well, it was largely peaceful. So that's talking about an event inaccurately, but they speak about Antifa at large inaccurately, painting them as the good guys.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, we're
literal
no
with the names,
perfect.
not when it comes to
they wouldn't
Nazi.
have been anywhere near this had it not been for
National
the fact that white
socialism.
Draw the line.
Nazis were out
Wordplay?
scaring
Come on.
the living
Start an
daylights
organization
out
called
of
The Good
most of
Guys.
the people in that town.
I think that a lot of people recognize that when pushed, self-defense is a legitimate response to white supremacist and neo-Nazi violence.
He wrote a
The
handbook.
problem is to equate the violence in reaction against bigotry with the bigotry itself is to misunderstand the fact that when you go to cancer treatment, the radiation is tough treatment, but it is meant to remove the cancer.
I love it. So he was probably looking at the show map before. He's like, yeah, this is good. I'm going to look really smart saying that.
So by his logic,
Analogy for today.
they're beating the Republican out of us, essentially, by that logic.
By the way, I agree with everything that they said, that not all punches are equal, that you have to look at a response to violence, that violence is not a completely inappropriate response when it's conducted in self-defense. But keep in mind, Proud Boys, again, I'm not associated with them. I'm not a supporter of joining groups because I think you get this mass hypnosis and groupthink and you get this amoeba that's the mob and it's dangerous. Not a fan of it. But Proud Boys, a lot of these groups were created in response to Antifa violence.
Yeah.
Right? They say, I love that too, by the way.
Chicken and
Antifa,
the egg.
anti-fascist, national, socialist. Stop with the wordplay. You really believe Nazis were socialists? Well, I don't know. Gun control, anti-free speech, higher taxes, national. Well, okay, listen, but they were racist. What? Are you Antifa? Yeah, I am.
Secretly, yes.
But here's what's important. These groups were created. The reason the Proud Boys were walking in Portland, by the way, if anyone can send me any footage from this weekend of the Proud Boys assaulting random people, any footage of the right-wing groups, because they were tarred and feathered as extreme right-wing groups, and maybe there were some extremists, any footage of them berating cops and saying that all cops are bastards, any of them. The white supremacists, right? I saw American History X. They should be worse than just walking through the streets and leaving. They were created as a response to Antifa violence. Antifa claims they were a response to what? Fascism. What's fascism? You see the t-shirts, you see the signs, anyone voting for Donald Trump. The Proud Boys had a clear reason, defending Trump supporters against violent leftists like Antifa. Antifa sees anyone who supports Donald Trump as fascists, therefore, by their own logic, as they've described, therefore they are warranting, they are deserving of violent action, just for having a MAGA hat. Think about that for a second. And by the way, while we're talking about fascism doesn't generally come from a president who lowers taxes, who deregulates, who supports free speech and wants an armed populace. Generally speaking, fascism comes from the people who are wearing masks and want to beat the shit out of people who have a different opinion from them. And that is why this group needs to be defined as a terrorist organization. That is not at all hyperbolic. I want to see them behind bars, or at least on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list.